The rehearsal process. Do you believe you used your rehearsal time effectively during your rehearsal period? Yeah, I think 90% of the time, me and my band would try and utilise our time as best we could. We would for the most part, turn up on time. For every scheduled pod lesson that we had, we would also try and set up 5 minutes early to avoid, taking up 10 minutes of our precious pod time with setting up mic stands and tuning our guitars and things like that. Another thing we did to sort of make the most of our rehearsal time is we would perform our songs and our whole set list, song for song, back to back, as we would perform in December, which basically stopped us from chatting in between playing the songs and would stop us getting distracted and things like that. So it helped us make the most of our rehearsal time. One thing I would change for the future is I would try to book 2 or 3 extra rehearsal times a week, staying after college later on or starting earlier, and maybe one at the weekend, to try and get the most rehearsal time we can in order to tighten up our songs and have them nailed to a point where we can't play them wrong, where we just get it right every time. The gig. What did you have to do for your gig, and what songs did you perform? Our set list is we started with Toots and the Maytals, 5446 What's My Number. We then went on to play Anya's original, which is called Pills. Then we played Play That Funky Music. Then we played the Christmas song, which was War Is Over. Happy Christmas, War Is Over. Then we played Play That Funky Music. Then my second original, which unfortunately doesn't have a name. And we finished it off with I Will Survive. The main thing I personally had to do was improvise a guitar solo and Play That Funky Music, White Boy. Instead of learning the whole solo note for note, I listened to the solo and listened to the main sort of parts in the solo, which made it recognisable. So, for instance, the bends at the start on the high B and E string, I played that note for note, but then I went in to a sort of pentatonic improvisation, as I thought if I had to learn the solo note for note, it would put a lot of pressure on me and I would end up ruining the solo and getting too nervous so I can actually play it. Whereas with the improvisation, I felt I sort of could relax and just play what naturally felt right. And I knew that any note I played in the pentatonic scale would sound okay and it would work with the instrumental behind the solo, so I didn't have to worry about playing an out of tune note or anything like that. My feelings before the gig, I was fairly nervous, a bit of shaking of the hands, and I actually messed up on Toots and the Maytals by just coming out of time, and then I couldn't find when to come back in with Anya with the 2 ska chords. But after Toots and the Maytals, I warmed up and I gained confidence as the gig was carried out, and by the end, and we were finishing with I Will Survive, my confidence was really there and I could end up just relaxing and just enjoying the music, which also helped me able to sort of move about the stage more and just sort of get into the groove. Another thing I had to do for the gig was set up my amp. So I used the Kieran Kettner amp, and I also used a foot switch pedal for Play That Funky Music, where I'd step on the pedal and go into an overdriven tone from a clean tone as I played the solo, and then I'd step back on the pedal and go back into the clean, funky sound for the chorus and the verses. For the most part, I used the clean sound, but with a couple of tweaks on my guitar. For instance, I would maybe put the treble up a bit on my second original and things like that. So just each song had a different tone, a different guitar tone, rather than having one boring tone for across the whole set, which I think wouldn't sound very well, and it would take away from the performance of the songs. What aspects of your performance do you think didn't go so well, and why? I would say at the start of my performance, like I said before, when I messed up, I just felt a bit nervous, and I was stood still at the start, and I couldn't move about because I was just concentrating on playing the notes and playing the songs instead of, moving about and thinking more about the performance side of interacting with the audience or moving about stage or dancing or anything like that. How do you think you could have prevented this from occurring? Well, I think the best thing to sort of do for nerves, what reassures me, is knowing that I've got all of the songs nailed and all the songs already tight with my band. And I would say 5 out of the 6 songs I was happy with and I was confident to play. But I would say the main thing was just my solo and playing that funky music that I was really worried about, and I didn't want to mess up, because obviously the spotlight's on you, and if you mess that up, it's going to be really embarrassing. So I think the main thing I could have done from preventing it is just maybe putting in a few extra rehearsals with my band and highlighting the weak spots in some of our songs, so I didn't have anything to worry about on the day of the gig. How was your band communication and interaction on stage? So our band communication and interaction on stage, on the most part, was okay. Me and Declan would maybe look at each other. If one of us played, a out of tune note or something like that, or we'd sort of look at each other to go in to the next verse, or a cue to each other to play the next riff for the second original. And for the last song, I Will Survive, there was a lot of eye coordination within the band, as the part where we go into the solo, Anya dies down on the keyboard, sorry, not into the solo, into the chorus. The whole band cuts out and Anya does a rundown on the piano. So there we had to all look at each other and make sure that we were all, we were all in time with each other, and we all knew when to slow down and when to stop. So I think that was some good communication there. How was your band presentation on stage? So we all discussed a theme the night before of camo and sunglasses. We all went through with it, and we all wore matching camouflage jackets and tops and joggers. So I think our band presentation was quite good, and we sort of got a bit of a staple theme with Declan's sunglasses, where he would also wear these sunglasses in lesson, and they had a blacked out lens, and I think someone in the classroom just said, "Oh look, Tinted," and that name Tinted just stuck, and everyone would know our band and recognise our band when someone had sunglasses on. So I think we sort of had almost a band image, and almost we had our own sort of identity where people would recognise us, which I think is, it's a very good thing to achieve for a band that haven't been playing for very long, where they can have a recognisable item and a recognisable almost a brand, I think it's quite a good thing to achieve. What were the standout moments of your band? The standout moments of my band, I think, were the songs which we got the biggest reaction from the audience. I would say the biggest reactions we got were for Play That Funky Music and for Toots and the Maytals. Personally, I think those were our two strongest songs as a band, as we practiced these the most, and we got these two songs from the very early stages of our band. So we'd had those two songs for the longest, compared to some of them we only started a few weeks before we performed. So I think, we were able to rehearse Play That Funky Music and Toots and the Maytals the most, and we were able to get them really tight to where we almost couldn't fail when we were playing them. But I have to admit there were some rhythm guitar parts on Play That Funky Music. They were a little bit loose because of nerves coming up to the solo. I went out of time a couple of times. But yeah, I would say those are our standout moments. And my 3 top tips for my next performance, I think I will just practice until I can't get it wrong. I just play it 9 out of 10 times, whatever track I'm performing next. I just know all the lyrics or all the riffs by the back of my hand, and I know them really well, so I don't have to worry about, being under rehearsed. My next top tip, I would say, is again getting in extra rehearsals with my band, so we're all getting along if we can, and have a good band chemistry, because I think without a good band chemistry, which can only be achieved through playing together and putting in the extra hours and wanting to be in a band together, I think without the band chemistry, when you see a band that's under rehearsed and they don't actually really get along, or they're not friends outside the band, you can see straight through it. I think it really cuts in to the performance side of things, and it can really bring down a band's performance. My final top tip, I would say, is to try and look past any disagreements within the band and just try and be as productive as possible. So, for example, if someone had a disagreement on a song, or someone had some personal issues outside of the band, they wouldn't try and let that show. They wouldn't sort of let their emotions get hold of them in the rehearsal time. So if I had a bad day, I wouldn't bring it into the pod. I'd keep it to myself and try and be as productive as possible, instead of, letting myself maybe get in an argument or something like that. So yeah, those are my 3 top tips.